Welcome again, everyone. We're about to get started with the Tommy Cook interview. So if everyone will find a seat or find a viewpoint, then please do so. Okay, it seems like everyone's getting settled. Welcome again to ECOF 2023, Huckster Room, Day 1. This is the first of our events here. Thank you, someone's clapping, we'll take that. We'd like to welcome our special guest, actor, writer, producer Tommy Cook, who starred as Kimbu in the 1941 serial Jungle Girl, starring Francis Gifford and Tom Neal, and based in title only, not story but in title, on Edgar Rice Burroughs' novel. Tommy followed this role with this as a role as Kimba, the little brother of the villainous Leah, who was played by Aquanetta in Tarzan and the Leopard Woman, which starred Johnny Weissmuller, Brenda Joyce, and Johnny Sheffield. And we all know what we're here for. We're here for the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff. So we're going to jump ahead in Tommy's career from early childhood, and we'll come back and revisit that. We're going to go ahead and start with the Edgar Rice Burroughs films. So are you getting this, Henry? Ahmed? We're good. Okay. We'll start by discussing your work on the 2 Edgar Rice Burroughs films and circle back to your early entry to show business. Tell us about how you got the role as Kimbu in Jungle Girl. This was one of your first roles on screen.
First of all, nice to see all of you here, and we'll have some fun. In 1940, I was 10 years old, and I got the role of the original Little Beaver in the Red Ryder serial at Republic Studios in the valley portion of LA. They had a ranch in Encino. In those days, you could buy a couple of acres for $10, and that's where we shot all the location scenes. And that was directed by 2 directors, John English and William Whitney. And they were wonderful to me. William Whitney had his own horses at his home, his ranch home, and on the weekends I would go and horseback ride at Bill Whitney's home. Anyway, when it came to Jungle Girl in the next year or so, the 2 directors sought me again and brought me in to play Kimbu in Jungle Girl.
Very good. So you had a good relationship with these directors. Can you tell us a little bit about, because, you know, the early serials, it was, 10, 12, 15 episodes. How did they divide up the directorial chores and how they worked this?
Well, that's an interesting question. Actually, 2 ways. They would work together on a scene, and then they would assign a certain scene where just John English would direct it, and then Bill Whitney would come in and do the next scene. But it worked very well, and my being so young, they couldn't have been nicer to me.
That's very good. And you've talked a little bit, with me personally about what a nice guy Whitney was to you.
Oh,
he would take you riding and bring you back. What was John English like as a person?
Well, I can't really tell you as a person that he was distinguished. Both William Whitney and John English were very well known and respected as directors in westerns, and so it was a good venture being with them.
Now, I'd like to hear a few brief memories of your co-stars. We'll keep you on the mic, and I'll say some names, and you tell me what you can remember of them, what it was like. I know, as you said, everyone was nice to you because you're a child on set, but any sort of insight into their personality or their work habits? So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and I'll prompt you with your co-stars.
Yep. Okay.
First of all, lead Francis Gifford.
Well, she, of course, was the star of Jungle Girl. Very pretty, very nice. I didn't have many personal interludes with her at all, except when we were shooting and doing a scene together. But Tom Neal, who was the co-star, Tom was in the columns at the time, going from one woman to another, and there was a lot of problems, and but he was a lot of fun. We were good buddies, and I really enjoyed working with Tom Neal.
Well, that's good to hear. As you mentioned, he was very pugnacious. He got into fights. He was kind of a troubled, scandal-prone guy, but I'm glad he was a nice guy to you.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Frank Lactine.
Well, Frank Lactine was a distinguished character actor in a lot of westerns, and he was, of course, prominent in Tarzan and the Leopard Woman, and a lot of these characters I had worked with previously, going way back when I first came out here from Minnesota. I had no memory until I was in a terrible auto accident. My father got quite ill with Brice disease. Kidneys weren't functioning, and that's what brought us to California. So we drove here. My dad had to take a train because he couldn't handle, you know, being in a car for 3 or 4 days. And we were in a terrible accident in Van Horn, Texas. Our driver that we hired fell asleep, and the driver in the other car was drunk, and boom, I was sitting on my mother's lap in the front seat and hit the windshield, bruises and cuts all over my face. Obviously no one was killed, but a lot of injuries. But that's when my memory came back, and I remember they couldn't operate on us in Van Horn. They didn't have the medical facility, so they put us all in an ambulance. I remember I was on the floor and drove us to El Paso. And then when we were there, they put this washcloth over my forehead, ether. That was the anesthetic that they used in those days, ether. And so I remember that, and my memory then just really exploded from that time on. And I lost my train of thought. What were we getting to?
This is a great memory. Just your co-stars. You're telling us how you got to LA. That's great.
Yeah. They tell me that in my very young days, I used to dress up with funny outfits and try to entertain one of my grandparents, who was evidently had dementia and Parkinson's disease. And when my father, I had a brilliant father, graduated from Harvard, and he came down with Brice disease right after I was born. And when he was evidently a member of the Rotary clubs back in those days in Minnesota, Duluth. And they tell me that during those Rotary Club meetings that I would get on a table and start dancing and singing and fooling around. Anyway, when we get here, my mother figures, well, maybe my son might have a little talent or something. And so she first took me to the Ben Bard Playhouse, where I met one of my great buddies, Darrell Hickman. And Darrell and Dwayne Hickman, remember Dobie Gillis. And anyway, from then on, my mother took me to the Pasadena Playhouse, one of the great playhouses in the nation. And I auditioned for a play, Peter Goes to the Fair, directed by Betty Smith, and I got the role as the star of the play. And I stayed there for about 1.5 years. I did 7 plays. One of them, I co-starred with George Reeves. Remember, he played Tarzan on the television series at Gilmore Brown's Playbox. They had the main stage up above the second floor, the laboratory stage, and Gilmore Brown's Playbox. And I did plays in all those theaters there. And so that was a wonderful experience. Now, my mother sees an article in a magazine about a free audition at NBC at Sunset and Vine. So she takes me there, they tape my voice. 2 weeks later, I get a call back to come and audition for Arch Oboler, the iconic writer, producer, director, along with Orson Welles and Norman Corwin, as the three greatest writer, producer, directors in radio. So I audition, and it calls for a young little German boy. And I don't know how I found out, but I could do it, little German boy. And I must have heard some German people, you know, and so I get the role. It's just a small role. It stars Alla Nazimova, the great Russian actress. It was in Arch Oboler's award-winning shows, Every Man's Theater on NBC. So Arch comes out after the show, thanks everybody, and he says, you know, I got to go to Chicago next week. I got to do a show with this little Dickie Hyland. He's a good little actor, but you know, with everything I'm doing right now, I don't want to go to Chicago. Alla Nazimova goes over and whispers into Arch's ear and says, if you don't want to go to Chicago, take a chance on this little Tommy Cook. The next week, I star in Problem Papa on Every Man's Theater. Howard Duff plays my father. The great Mercedes McCambridge is the leading lady. The great Gordon Jenkins doing the music. And that's what started me off. I ended up starring in several award-winning shows for Arch Oboler. And he always wore sort of a suede leather jackets. My mother gave him one of the shows. And he went over to her and he said, you know, I worked with all kinds of kids in show business, and your son gives more freshness and to a role than anyone I've ever worked with. And I've always remembered that. He wrote for me in 4 different shows. He wrote for me, wouldn't let me take a script home. And we wouldn't get into rehearsal until the dress rehearsal. He didn't want anyone interfering with my take on these roles. So some of the glorious, glorious moments of my life were working with Arch Oboler. And I also worked with Orson Welles. I get a call one day, advertising agency in New York. Mr. Cook, we understand that you've worked with Orson Welles, and we're interested, we're hoping maybe you can put us in touch with him. And I said, well, he's staying with Peter Bogdanovich, the director, in Brentwood, where I live. And I said, what do you want? Well, we want him to do a commercial for the Nika Whiskey Company in Japan. And the commercial will only be shown in Asia, won't be shown in the United States. Can you help us? I said, well, I can definitely get to Orson, and let's see what we can do. And so I called over to Peter Bogdanovich, got Orson, explained it to him, and he said, yeah, he'll do it as long as I can have my own cinematographer, Gary Graver. They said, fine. It's all set up to do it in Los Angeles. We're all there, ready to go. Orson says to the director, you know something? I think we can do a better job in Paris, France. That's where we should shoot it. They look at him, what could they do? They end up going to Paris to shoot this commercial because Orson wanted a free trip to go to France. That was Orson Welles. But and I started a couple of shows for Norman Corwin. They called him the Poet Laureate of radio. One, one show that was, I won't go into it now, but I was able to work with some of the most wonderful people, radio personalities. Art Schobler had a great stock company, as did Orson Welles, and it wasn't like being in a film or a television show. It was family, and there was a restaurant called Brittingham's Restaurant right next door to CBS at Gower and Sunset, and in between rehearsals, everybody would go to Brittingham's and we would have fun together. And but those radio days, the golden years of radio, starting late 30s, the 40s, and the beginning 50s, those were happiest times in my life. I would, I was, as I say, I was the original Little Beaver in the Red Ryder serial Republic, and then for the ABC Blue Network radio show, for Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays for Langendorf Bread. And then I was junior on The Life of Riley with William Bendix on NBC. And then on Sunday, Studio C at CBS, The Blondie Show. I played Little Alexander.
Oh my gosh.
I got to tell you real quickly, Arthur Lake, there was nobody like him who played Dagwood. And every week, 20 minutes before we go on the air, he rushes out of the studio. I follow him, runs across the street to Columbia Pictures across the street. That's where they shot the Blondie films. And he tells the guard, "Get me into my dressing room, quick, quick." And so we run and they get him into his dressing room and he puts on his Dagwood outfit. He can't find his bow tie. He takes some toilet paper and fixes it up and puts it there like it. And we rushed back just in time to Studio C for Arthur Lake to say, "Blondie!" Every week he would do that. So those were really the fun days.
That's good. Sounds like a little method acting on his part. You know, that's great. Circling back around to, so you do radio, you come in, you're consider yourself more of a radio guy than a screen guy.
Well, over the years, I played just about every young boy in a radio show from Hollywood. Altogether over the years, close to 3,000 radio shows. But you know, originally in those days, you had to do a show for the East Coast. You go in and do it around 4 or 5 o'clock, and you come back around 7 or 7:30, and you would do the same show for the western part of the United States. So that's what Cuban. I mean, there were weeks when I did some 16 shows in 1 week. I got to tell you, one of the great actors in radio, Marvin Miller. He starred in films. He narrated. He played characters. He was one of the greats. And he's in the Red Ryder radio show one week. And he's looking desolate. And somebody comes over to him. And he says, "Marvin, what's wrong?" He says, this week, I don't understand. I could only do 30 shows this week." Oh, gosh. Oh, Marvin Miller.
Now, skipping ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
Tarzan and the Leopard Woman. Tell us how you got cast in that and your memories of your co-stars.
Well, Kurt Newman was the director of the film, and maybe he saw me in Jungle Girl. But anyway, with my agent, Win Rockamora at the time, and they called me, and my agent made the deal, and so I became Kimba, Aquanetta's little kid, and we shot that film. It was right near the end of World War II, and we shot the film near Santa Anita Racetrack in Pasadena. There was an area with tall trees close together where the stunt people could, you know, swing from tree to tree. And that's where we shot most of the film. And I must say that Johnny Weissmuller was the Tarzan. There was no one like it. I did a lot of episodes for Tarzan, the television series, where Ron Ely played Tarzan. And Ron did a lot of shows with me. And then when I went in and produced and directed celebrity charity tennis and golf events around the world, Ron Ely was with me all the time. But Johnny Weissmuller was the perfect Tarzan. I never had much association with Brenda Joyce, but Johnny Sheffield, who played Boy, there was a rivalry between us. Yeah, and we had a fight scene in the film, but off stage, just keep your distance from me, Johnny.
Makes sense.
Now, an interesting thing that's come to light, I guess it was in light with other people. Aquanetta, she had styled herself. She had a whole background. She was a Native American born in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and then she said she was a Latin American. They called her the Venezuelan volcano. And the black press at the time said, tracked her down and said she was black.
Yeah.
Did this ever come up? Was this an open secret in Hollywood, or did anyone know?
Actually, I was too young to really know. To my memory, there was never. She was a very, very attractive woman, and the crew. I was very, very naive as a young kid, and the crew came to me and they said, "You know, you should show some fondness for Aquanetta, please. And when you're in a scene, sort of hold her and be nice to her." And so in one scene, I ended up where my hands were on her breasts. Didn't know what the heck I was doing, but the crew talked me into it.
And I think you said the director yelled a big loud cut at that point, right?
I ended up doing another film for Kurt Newman. It was called Mohawk. And we shot that in New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I had a wonderful relationship with director Kurt Newman.
And just to bring it back to, you were talking about shooting at the jungle area. That is now the LA County Arboretum. So some of the folks in here from out of town, we had a Tarzan convention in LA and we went out to the Arboretum to see where these were filmed. So, and they celebrate that Tarzan heritage at the Arboretum. Let's talk a little bit about what it's like to be a child actor and be educated there. You went to John Burroughs, you went to Los Angeles High School. Tell me about high school, college, and the Marine Corps.
Well, I originally, when we finally found a little house to live in Los Angeles, 6517 Olympic Place, 1 block long, right off Olympic Boulevard, block or two from Beverly Hills. So I originally went to Carthay Center School. I'll never forget the principal, Margaret F. McGraw. She had this wonderful English handwriting, never forget it. Ethel Doss, vice president. Then I went to John Burroughs Junior High, right off Highland and Wilshire, and then Los Angeles High School. And I lived next door to Dr. Esther Bartosh, who was a doctor at USC and very much involved in tennis at the LA Tennis Club. And she helped Bobby Riggs in his youthful years, helping him with clothes and food and instruction. And he became my idol. He was short and he had a kind of game that I used. And I started playing tennis, going across, getting on my bike and going a couple blocks to the La Cienega Park where they had 9 tennis courts, and started playing tennis, and would come in contact with the great Pancho Gonzalez and Pancho Segura, and we'd work out. And so I got involved in playing in junior tennis tournaments, and that's what gave me the idea. At that time, Billie Jean Moffitt was one of the top women tennis players, And she came to Jack Kramer, former great champion who retired. He had a bad hip, and he became director of the major tennis event on the West Coast, Pacific Southwest Championships. In those days, they didn't have the big stadiums. They played the tournament at the LA Tennis Club on Clinton Street, just on the way to Hollywood. And so they put up extra stands there, so there'd be about 3,500 people to watch. And I happened to be around there, and Billie Jean King goes to Jack Kramer and says, "Why are we not getting the money that the men are getting?" And Jack said, "Well, people really come to see the men play tennis, and especially starting with the quarterfinals, the men's play 3 out of 5 sets, not just 2 out of 3. So in those days, the women got very little money, and most of it went to the men. So I saw that between those two. I heard the conversations. And after that tournament, that's when Billie Jean Moffitt went to Philip Morris, the head of Philip Morris, and the Virginia Slims tournament just for women started because of that. Because of that animosity between Billie Jean King and Jack Kramer, I decided that maybe Bobby Riggs, who had such a great personality, he was in his 50s now, and he still played tennis, maybe Bobby Riggs to play Billie Jean King, the top woman, you know, might be interesting. So I put together the premise for the event, and I took it to a couple of sponsors, and they said, "An old man playing against a top woman in tennis? You see the door? Use it." So Bobby then, I became close buddies with Bobby, and he then challenged in the press to play the top woman in the world, and Margaret Court, at that time of Australia, was the leading woman. She had beaten Billie Jean King in an event, I think, at Wimbledon. Margaret Court takes him up on it, and they played down in the San Diego area. I went and was with Bobby for the match. And just before the match starts, Bobby Riggs comes to Margaret Court, and it was on Mother's Day, and he said, oh, Margaret, please, take it easy on me. I'm an old guy. I can barely hit the ball. Please, don't make me look bad." He messed up her mind. She couldn't hit a ball. Bobby goes right through her and beats her 2 out of 3 sets. And so, with that, Jerry Perenchio, top producer, and sees the match, and he comes to me and Bobby, and he puts together the Battle of the Sexes at the Houston Astrodome. We played the match before close to 50,000 people, and the Bobby Riggs, Billie Jean King, millions all over the world tuned in to see that match. And guess what Bobby did? He didn't train. He hustled all the wealthy Texans in Houston there, you know, and never really trained. He thought it would be a cinch since he went right through Margaret Court, and Billie Jean took it seriously, and she went right through him. There was a clause that if he lost, she would have to play him again. She refused. She refused. And Bobby and Jerry Perenchio, who made a lot of money on it, said, the ether's worn out. We had a great time. We made a lot of money. We'll let it go. So there was never another match. But Bobby Riggs, and then after that match, at that time, I was putting on celebrity charity tournaments around the world. I would go to Monaco with Prince Renier, Prince Albert, and Princess Grace Kelly. and we would do a tournament there, and I would have Clint Eastwood and Chuck Heston and John Forsythe, Desi Arnaz Jr., and Farrah Fawcett, and those kind of people that loved tennis. You know, we never would pay them. They would get all their expenses, you know, and travel to these great resorts, and they loved tennis. And where do we go from there? Trying to think. Anyway, I ended up putting together another series. I decided, and I went to the networks to put on a series called The Challenge of the Sexes, Men Against Women in Sports, based on skill, not muscle, you know. And that did very well. And then we went into Celebrity Challenge of the Sexes. And we played the tournament in the Los Angeles area, right outside to a big stadium, 7,500 people, standing room only. And it had Bill Cosby, who was #1 at that time, celebrity, and Farrah Fawcett playing against each other. And I'm on the sidelines coaching them. And so that started the Celebrity Challenge of the Sexes. That was on CBS.
Very good. Now, you also conceptualized a couple of movies, one Players and the other Roller Coaster. Tell us a little about those.
Yep. Well, the tennis world was my second hobby. And anyway, I decided that I wanted to do a tennis film. And so at that time, the two celebrity families that were always with me playing in the tournaments, the wonderful Lloyd Bridges with Bo Bridges, and played in all of them, and Dick Van Patten and his sons, Vinnie Van Patten, Jimmy Van Patten, Nels Van Patten, they were with me. And so I wrote a story, and I wanted Farrah Fawcett and Vinnie Van Patten to star in it because they were, let's just say, very close at that time. And anyway, as it turned out, I took my script to Robert Evans, who became head of production at Paramount, and my title, original title, was Balls. He says, "You must be kidding, Tommy," with that title. "You must be kidding. I want to bring in a top writer and a director, and let's see what we can put together." So anyway, it ended up with Ally McGraw as the female star, and we tested Vinnie. He was very, very young at the time, and Dean Paul Martin, Dean Martin's son. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I started teaching some of my celebrity friends, and I ended up going to Dean Martin's house, 601 Mountain Drive in Beverly Hills, had his own tennis court, and I taught the family, Jeannie Martin and the kids and little Dean Paul, and he became quite a top player in the juniors. And he tested for the role, and he was better for the role. So the title was changed to Players, and it was a Paramount film. I was associate producer, and I choreographed all the tennis sequences. And we were the first company ever to be given permission to shoot at the hallowed grounds at Wimbledon. I'm the only civilian that worked out on center court at Wimbledon with Pancho Gonzalez. Oh gosh, I gotta tell you, when we were shooting there, right during the tournament, a few minutes before Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova come out and play in the finals of the women's, they allow me. I come out with a hand mic and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We're shooting a film, a tennis film called Players, and I'd like to introduce you to a couple of the stars of the film right now." And so here it is. He happens to be Dean Martin's son, a fine junior champion, Dean Paul Martin. who the hell is Dean Paul Martin in the tennis world? They don't know, and nothing. Now I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. And so I then said, well, now, ladies and gentlemen, also playing a co-starring role is one of the all-time tennis greats, the one and only Pancho Gonzalez. And Pancho walks out and the crowd, 14,000 people, go crazy. And so we did a quick scene of rallying with Dean Paul Martin and John McEnroe, who was in the film, rallying there. And all of a sudden they give me the cross sign, get off the courts, get off the courts, get the cameras off. And 2 seconds later, Chris Evert and Martina walk on and play the finals. Ally McGraw came to me later and she says, Tommy, I've seen a lot of things. This was exciting. So treasured moments playing at Wimbledon.
That's really amazing. And you did, back during the disaster film craze, you did a film called, or conceived a film called Roller Coaster.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in the good old days in Los Angeles, right by the ocean, Pacific Ocean, there was Ocean Park, and they had a little roller coaster and a Ferris wheel. And I went down there when I was so young and got on the roller coaster, and I was so scared I closed my eyes the first time it went around. And then I opened my eyes and I realized, goodness, this runs the gamut of emotions, a roller coaster. So then, over the years, whenever I would go to a location to shoot a film or television series, and if there was a amusement park around, I would find a way to get on and go on the roller coasters. And so it stayed with me, and I decided that this would make a wonderful film. The amusement parks were just for, you know, a wonderful place for people to be happy and to dream and fantasize. And so I wrote brought in a writer friend of mine to work with me. I gave him the whole story essentials and said, put it together for me. And I took it over to Jennings Lang, a producer, former agent at William Morris, and he's now a producer at Universal. And I took the script to him, and they bought it. And it became Roller Coaster. Starred George Segal and Timothy Bottoms. It was Helen Hunt's first movie when she was 12 or 13 years old. And I was also associate producer on that film. And it opened up roller coaster themed parks all over the world based on that film, Roller Coaster. And over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been working on what we call the prequel to Roller Coaster. And my new title is White Knuckles, Last Ride. And I'm trying to get it, finishing the final draft now. And it has virtual reality, augmented reality. It is so timeless. And if I can find a way to get Jennifer Lawrence to play the protagonist, she's the star of the film, and somebody like Chris Evans to play the head of security, the two fall in love, that I'm going to find a way to get White Knuckles Last Ride going into theaters again in the next year or two.
You're about to turn 93 years old.
Yes.
You're still working as now you can hire your writers, you're working as a producer. You just recently appeared on the TV show Space Force, just a couple of years ago. Tell us about your most recent acting gig.
Yes, that was a year or two ago. I was brought in and I played a Southern congressman to a new show called Space Force. And it was co-created and starred Steve Carell, who was trying to set up a new unit of the U.S. forces, Space Force. So I had some nice scenes with Steve Carell there, and I'm saying, we got to do this, we got to do this. I'm giving you permission to bring in everything you want to do for your Space Force. That was one of the last roles I played in.
Well, I hope there's more roles in your future. We'll open it up now to questions. Any of you have questions? Bill Wagner back there, right on the...
Tommy over here. So,
Yes.
roller coaster, that was in Sensorround, wasn't it?
Yes, it was in Sensorround.
At the time that you, because I was a manager of a movie theater where we had Sensorround.
Yes.
People don't remember Sensorround. Universal came up with this process where they installed this equipment in theaters, and they had to promise one Sensorround picture a year to get theaters to buy the equipment. And the thing was, it made everything shake. Everything shook. So with roller coaster, it was perfect. Every time the roller coaster would move, the seats would shake, your ears would shake, and they did about 8 films, and then they kind of gave up on it because you had to come up with films where everything was explosions and shaking. But the film was really good. George Segal was good.
Yeah. You know, in those days, we shot that film in the late 70s. And in those days, they didn't have CGI, computer graphics. And so the roller coaster scenes in the original roller coaster film really were not that exciting. Can you imagine what we can do now with roller coasters where the audience feels like they're actually in the coasters and going through with the CGIs, and technology is so unbelievable these days, what we can do to excite people as they're actually in the coasters, you know, going through the thrills. As I said before, roller coasters is the gamut of emotions for people. And so I'm very excited about putting this new film together.
Very good. More questions? John in the back.
Sure. Tommy, how long did it take you to rehearse a radio script? You know, I mean, you did like 16 in 1 week, I understand.
Yep.
How long did you have to prepare for the radio?
Well, most of the time we would go right in with the script and do a quick rehearsal, go out for a bite, come in and do the dress rehearsal. For timing, you know, we were over-timed. We would cut out a couple of lines, etc., and go on and do the show. For other radio shows, we would do the rehearsal one day and come back the next day or two, and for the dress rehearsal and go on the air. For Arch Obler's shows and Orson Welles, it was just a one-day operation. And I remember I was doing a radio show with Orson Welles one day, and he stops rehearsal, and he starts telling us, he starts dramatizing a scene having nothing to do with the show. We don't know where he's coming from. And he's going on and he's playing characters, you know, as only Orson Welles can do. And he goes on for an hour and a half. Finally, the director said, well, that's it for the day. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll try to put the show together.
Jimmy Goodwin there has a question.
Well, you were in the Corps for how long and what did you do?
In the Marine Corps, yeah. In those days, if you were in a university, if you were in school of some sort, you were exempt from the draft. And so I was going to UCLA, but then I got a role to go to the Philippines to be featured with Tyrone Power in American Guerrilla in the Philippines. And so I lost my eligibility. I went there, I played the Filipino underground leader, spoke a little Tagalog. Doon na ba hapon ini? Nakaibalo ba ka mo ginikitawag? Dini sa Mindanao. Still remember some of my lines. Anyway, Tyrone Power at that time was one of the all-time great movie heroes. He was married to Linda Christian. I think his wife Linda was pregnant at the time. Totally professional. Never gave us any problems whatsoever. And when we flew, in that time, we were on Pan American Airways, where we had our own beds and could sleep. And when we got there at Manila, 15,000 people are there to meet Tyrone Power and the crew. So we had, those were great days. And we shot in locations unbelievable, where snakes were coming around and everything. I don't know how they could allow us to do that, to go to these areas in the Philippines. But, and my son ended up having a call center in the Philippines. He still owns a home there, has two beautiful little daughters from the Philippines, Cebu.
Tell us a little bit about the Marine Corps,
Right.
your experiences there.
Right. So now I'm drafted. I don't want to go in the Army. So I said to myself, well, I got to go in, I got to serve. Well, if I'm going to serve, I want to be with the best. So I drive downtown, I find a Marine Corps station there for enlistments, and I go in and I said, I want to be a Marine. Can I get in? Yeah. So I called my mother. I said, Mom, I'm off. She said, oh, fine, Tommy. Well, please take care of yourself and have a good time at Fort Ord in San Francisco in the Army. I said, oh, no, Mom. Mom, I'm not going to Fort Ord. I'm going down to San Diego. I'm going into the Marine Corps, Mom. Boom, went the phone. She almost had a heart attack. Anyway, so I took the train down to San Diego Recruit Depot, where we went through basic training, and then to Camp Pendleton. And I'm being trained as an infantryman. I'm tough in those days. I weighed 150 pounds, not 122. I was tough, and I was given the nickname Tough Monkey. That's what they called me when I was in the Marine Corps. So 2 weeks before leaving to go to Korea to fight, a vice president of NBC, where I'd done all these radio shows, calls the commanding general of the Corps and said, sir, I don't want to interfere with anything with the Marine Corps, but I'd like you to know that one of the young Marines that's about to venture into Korea, if you knew about his background in show business. And I said, I think maybe he could be of better use to you in a different provision rather than just as an infantryman. And so just before I left, they switched me and put me into PIO, Public Information Office, where we put on shows all over the country. And I would star in the Marines in Review. And we were on television a couple of times. And so I'll remember when I was in the Corps and training, they took us to the Post Theater they had there just to entertain us with the film. And I'm sitting there with all my Marine buddies. I'm a platoon leader at the time. And guess what? In the film, I'm in the film. The Marine buddies look at me. That's you. That's you. What? I said, well, I did a few films when I was a kid. And they kidded me about that. But very, very proud to have been a U.S. Marine. And I was honorably discharged after about 2.5 years or so, and came back and realized that I could no longer play young kids anymore. I'm an adult. So I decided to create a project for myself. Created a show called Young Man with a Badge, about a young police officer who could get into the trouble areas where the regular policemen cannot gain access. And I didn't know much about police warfare. And so I had a friend of mine who was a detective in the Hollywood division. And so I showed him the script and I said, can you help me in a couple of areas there? for how police would work, and he gave me some ideas. He took my script, without my knowledge, to Aaron Spelling at the time, who was one of the most successful and prolific producers of television shows, Beverly Hills, 90210, and several others. And my show became the Mod Squad. Everybody wanted me to sue. I said, sue Aaron Spelling? I said, we played baseball together in a park in Hollywood. I'm going to sue this great Aaron Spelling. I can't sue him. But my show became the Mod Squad. So that was interesting event in my life.
A lot of bittersweet memories in Hollywood. You know, a lot of almost happened and so forth. Any more questions? In the back, Frank.
Johnny, you were in several famous crime movies that are now known as film noirs. The Panic in the Streets, directed by
Elia Kazan. We shot that down in New Orleans. Yeah.
Cry of the City, directed by Robert Siodmak.
Yes, great. Yeah, played Richard Conte's brother.
Right, and you were great in that role as Tony Rome, I believe your name.
Yes, yes. At the end of the film, when Victor Mature was the investigator and cop that finally killed my brother, Richard Conte, and at the last scene in the film, I break down in the arms of Victor Mature.
That was a beautiful scene.
Robert Siodmak was one of the top directors at that time. But and then I did a film that I starred in called Teenage
Crime Wave?
Teenage Crime Wave with Molly McCart. I starred in that film. But I did a film called The Vicious Years. I played a little Italian kid. And I'm in the streets, living in the streets. And I see this guy in his late 20s commit a murder. And I follow him where he's going on my bike. He gets in a car and he goes back home. And I follow him into the home and I tell the family his father is there, etc. I saw your son commit a murder. I want to be helped out. I want some clothes and stuff. And they take me in, and they take a liking to me, and I become part of the family. And it was written by Ed Richard Nash, who wrote The Rainmaker. But I won the Photoplay Award for one of the leading performances of the year in The Vicious Years.
And I must say, I haven't seen that, but I've seen Teenage Crime Wave. And
Teenage.
the last scene there, where you break down for your dead girlfriend who was just shot by the cops.
I got to tell you, Sam Katzman was one of the producers, one of the top B producers in so many films in those years.
But that was a great scene.
So this scene that this gentleman is telling us about, where I break down at a funeral, and I told the director, I said, will you give me a couple of minutes? I want to prepare myself. I want to get ready. And while I'm preparing myself, Sam Katzman comes in. Hiya, Tom. How you doing? How's everything going? Tell me, how do you feel? I said, oh, Mr. Katzman, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please, I'm trying to create a scene now, right now. Will you leave me alone, please? That was Sam Katzman. Well, Teenage Crime Wave.
That was a very moving end scene of a movie. It was the highlight of the whole movie.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, we're going to take one final, oh, well, we got two. We'll take two final questions, and then we're going to move to the next phase of our program here with Tommy. Bill?
All those radio shows you did, were any of them in front of a live audience?
Oh, yes, yes. The Life of Riley was in an audience, and the Blondie Show had an audience. The Adventures of Red Ryder, no, the Adventures of Red Ryder radio show was an ABC Blue Network show. In those days, they didn't have studios. They would do it at NBC. We shot in Studio H, right next door to Lum and Abner. You remember Lum and Abner in Studio G? And so that's where we did the show.
Okay, Tim Clark, final question.
Hi, Tommy. With your networking connections, do you think you could light a fire under Sony to get moving on that Tarzan project?
Well, I can only put all my energies into the prequel of Roller Coaster right now.
Maybe he can return in a role as another villain in the Tarzan movie.
There you go.
All right, we're gonna, Tommy, we want to thank you. I want to tell everyone Tommy has given you a big hand. Thank you. Tommy has stills to sign and sell. If you have further questions for him, go back and chat with him. He'll be here today and tomorrow. Tommy, you've been such a gracious guest. We have a gift for you.
Oh, no.
And we're going to present this. We need to stand to do it, so we're going to let our cameras reset. I think Henry's got his in his hand, but we're going to stand and move the chairs aside. Dan Stevens is going to present the gift here. Dan is a master craftsman, and Dan conceived this. This is a surprise to the planning committee. This was a private thing Dan and I came up with. So we're going to stand up and we're going to present you with the gift, and then we're going to play a little game.
Called me one day and just said, you know, it'd be really great if we could do something for Tommy. And he'd like to work with wood and do things. So I said, oh, okay. So he gave me this nice project. And I thought, oh, that's super. So I said, oh, that's great.
Can you speak up a little bit there?
I said, oh, that's great. I can do that. I can make you something really fun. My wife did the case. But here you go, Tom.
I hope everyone remembers the Leopard Man back scratcher from Tarzan and the Leopard Woman.
Now you can really get Jane and Boy.
This is a facsimile replica of the War Club. Now comes the game part.
All right.
This is a wonderful gift.
Tracy, this way. Yeah, everybody turn this
Okay,
way.
we're going to get some photos first with the first gift.
That's so cool, Dan.
Thank you.
But Dan always goes above and beyond what he's asked. You see his sculptures back there. Check out his sculptures with the saber-toothed skulls, the bookends. So Dan decided to go above and beyond with Tommy. And so we're going to play Deal or No Deal. You can keep this gift, or you can take the other gift. But we're not going to be unfair to you and give you a booby prize in place of this. We're going to let you see the other gift. You can pick whichever one you want, and the other one will go on the fundraising auction to help defray the expenses.
Right.
And you can take this home. I'm sure everyone's going to want their photo of you beating them to death with this war club. and that's yours to keep. You can auction it for yourself. Whatever you want to do with this gift, it is yours. So let's, Dan, bring out the other present, and we'll let Tommy. I'll hold this.
Looks like a great back scratcher.
Oh, it is. It is. And we're going to let Tommy decide if he likes the other gift better.
Yeah, so that one wasn't enough. That one took me 3 weeks.
And I had no idea. Tell him how you measured Aquanetta's arm or whatever.
Well, yeah, I was like, he gave me a photo. So I'm looking at the photo going, oh my gosh, I have no idea how big this is. So I'm looking at her arm. So I'm like going by just the proportions of her arm, and that's pretty much what it is.
I mean, this thing has got some heft to it. If you got hit with that, forget the claws. This would knock you out, just the wood alone. So that's what, we noticed that this was a very heavy, awesome piece of weaponry. And I guess Dan got inspired by that.
I did. So it's leopard wood on the top. It's Brazilian leopard wood, and then maple, and then actually this was an umbrella stand for my house. So that worked out pretty good. So of course, I can never let things go. I can never ever let things, So that took me 3 weeks. So this weekend, this last weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I did this. And this is, oh, sorry. So this is a nice, so I made a box and did all these little things for it.
And tell them what it says. It's got the logo there, Tarzan and the Leopard
Tarzan and the
Woman.
Leopard Woman. This is a miniature. This is a miniature back scratcher.
Now that's a back scratcher.
No, that's
Yeah.
a back scratcher. But yeah, so
Oh, this is good. I'll take this.
I think we're all relieved Kimba won't be wielding this.
I've got my long-lost son right here in the first row.
Yeah,
David
that
here with
box
his lovely
the logo.
wife.
We'll get some pictures of that and hold it in front. We'll get the 3A guys.
What do we do with this, David?
Get back to the
All right, let's get some. Let me put the thing back. And let's stand in front of the microphone stand for some photos here. With Dan.
there you go.
Yeah, show the front of the box, like with the logo.
If you'll step in front of the microphone stand there. Oh, we dropped the
Oh, I dropped one of the little
one of
guys.
the pins. Yep, we'll step right up here, and everyone can get your photos.
This is.
All right, look up, smile. Let's start from this side and go. We'll start with Bill and eyes over there,
Eyes over there.
and we'll scan the room. Hit each camera as it flashes.
That's cool.
Now we've given Tommy a big hand. We're very thankful to Tommy. Let's give Dan a hand for donating these items.
I'd just like to say, finally, that I've had such an amazing life, a normal life, going to regular schools, wonderful parents, and then to be blessed working with some of the most creative and wonderful people in the world in the arts of motion pictures, television, and radio. It's been a great, great story, and I'm still going.
Yeah.